Hey guys, so I was messing around with some settings and I was kind of rereading some of the changes, some of the community recommendations for the experience changes and for the Hero League, Team League merging. And I just kind of thought about it and I was like, some of these community ideas are really, really good. And I wish that people would, I wish Blizzard would take some of these ideas. Now, I understand that in general, many of these ideas are things that you can't take. Many of these ideas are things that that won't work. For example, Dungeon Defenders 1, it came out, they learned their problems, and they brought out Dungeon Defenders 2. Then they brought it out to a community open thing. They wanted to create a game where everyone got to put in their input. I recommended an idea that would create a longevity in the game. It would lock out specific content, and it would make specific content either you needed a group to do it, or you needed you could only do it once per week. This would allow it to where they can make the game feel good, but the content's locked throughout the week. So you can play throughout the day, but then you can't get like the best gear in the game except for once per week. And the kind of like the raids are how the raids are handled in World of Warcraft. So I wanted to do it like that, and I recommended it, and people didn't like that because they didn't like locked content. So mine got like 7 votes. And the majority of the votes that I got from mine were from other game developers, people who understood the upsides and downsides. And on the other side were people who just wanted a good game. And so they all recommended, they didn't want locked content, they didn't want to be forced to play with teams. And what happened? Dungeon Defenders 2 got released, and everyone got bored of it in the first week. Then you had the new expansion that came out, and a few people came back, and they were able to do it by themselves, and there was no limit to how many times they could do it, so they just kept doing it over and over and over and over until they got all the gear for all their characters, and they were done within a couple days. So they essentially listened to the community, and it created a game that killed itself. I want to try to avoid that with Heroes of the Storm, and my worry is that Blizzard looked at the answer of this and said, they looked at the major problem that we had in Heroes of the Storm, which was the snowballing wasn't fun to watch, it wasn't fun to play. It felt like every game we played was either a stomp or get stomped, you know what I mean? So they wanted to find a way that made the games feel more even, felt like there was more team fights, so they looked to reducing the snowball factor, which when you won an objective, you destroyed forts, gained 2 to 3 levels of experience over the enemies, you always had an experience lead, you were able to steal camps and objectives, it just snowballed this whole effect over and over and over, as long as you were playing relatively safe, but also abusing your lead. This isn't good for the game, and we've noticed this for a while. It's had a problem for a while. So how do we answer this problem? Well, I've seen several answers. Their first thought was, well, let's make these catapults. And you saw in my last video, that the catapults could be a bad thing. I've come up with an answer to fix the catapult problem, which is simply tripling the damage and dropping the health by a third, which essentially makes it to where they're easier to deal with, but they're much scarier if you don't deal with them. Making it to where you can hold off, and if the catapult starts pushing on an opposite lane while you're in an objective, you can wait until someone disappears to go deal with it, and then you can go and fight, and it's a 4v5. Giving your team an advantage, but not necessarily an experience advantage. Giving the enemy team a risk where they can take an even fight, but then they might lose in another objective. There are a variety of reasons why I think that catapult change could fix it if they want to stick with this option. However, I've heard other options that were really good as well. There was one particular recommendation of someone who said, let's give a different sort of incentive to destroying a fort. And no one could really think of a good incentive. And I said, well, what is experience tied to? And it's tied to death timers. Well, what if you make it the opposite, where when you destroy a fort, the enemy loses death timers. So instead of you getting an experience advantage, you get a strategic advantage. Where if you destroy a couple forts, it costs them longer to respawn, so you can go and take a fight before an objective because you've destroyed a lot of their forts. If you lose people and they lose people in a fight before the objective, you get your people back faster, and then you start taking the objective, and then they get their people back, and then they can't take the objective. It allows you to add more strategy to the game, more risks, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're snowballing hard, because the team that lost more forts could be a more late game team that just wins more team fights. There's strategies to both. If you want to push your advantage early, you take a bunch of structures early, kill them while they're still not as strong, and then they have these long death timers allowing you to keep pushing your advantage. While in the opposite side, it makes it to where if you do lose a bunch of structures and you have a late game team, you just need to make sure no one dies, and you're in a pretty good spot because you can still win team fights. So that was a cool idea, and I was like, okay, so there's a lot of other ideas that they can do, but why aren't they asking us? And this is where I want to bring up the idea of a summit. What do I mean by a summit? A summit is something that they did for Warcraft 3. When they were bringing back Warcraft 3 Reforged, they brought in a lot of the big community members who played a lot of Warcraft 3. They brought in Grubby. They brought in Vipey. They brought in Alicia. They brought in all these people to go to the Warcraft 3 Summit to hang out, to talk about Warcraft 3, to talk to the developers and say what is the most important thing they believe should be in the game. And I don't know exactly how well that one turned out. I was not invited, which is perfectly fine. They don't know that I play Warcraft 3. I'm okay with that. No harm, no foul. But what I do want to know is, why can't we do a summit for Heroes of the Storm? I personally believe that Blizzard has a specific idea that they think will make the game better, but they're having trouble finding exactly how they want to make it work. The community has answers, but they don't know exactly what Blizzard is looking for. Blizzard can't tell them exactly what they're looking for because sometimes it sounds a little shallow. Think about the WoW Classic, for example. You think you want it, but you don't. That's a harsh way of saying something the same in Here's the Storm, where you might say something along the lines of, you think you want merged, or not merged Hero and TL, but you don't. Like, there's so many things that are good for the game, or good for the viewership of the game. Hearthstone, for example, I was watching this video that Reynad was talking about how he didn't like the RNG aspects of the game in the early game. He said that if there was no RNG aspects in the game at all, every game would play out the same. You would pretty much have the same playstyle throughout the thing. There's not enough decision making that you can do individually if there wasn't any sort of RNG. The decision making gets harder when there's chance that you have to add into it. So he says that RNG is okay, but RNG in the beginning of the game's a little bit too crazy. Like a knife juggler that throws a knife at a couple specific targets that ends up giving you a huge momentum swing that allows you to win the rest of the game because of that one thing. So, for me to always complain about the RNG of Hearthstone, because I don't like any of the RNG, a little bit is actually really good for the game. It's one of those things where they would say, you think you don't like the RNG, but you actually do. And it's the same problem we might have with Heroes of the Storm. They can't announce the real reason why they're trying to do the things that they're trying to do. However, maybe if they brought in a summit of all of the biggest people in the community, all of the big YouTubers, all of the big streamers, and some of the pro players, the people that are pretty much living off of this game, that would do anything to make sure that this game works, but the people that also know the ins and the outs of the game. See, the funny thing is while a lot of the Blizzard employees play a lot of the game, their job is usually much more about looking at very specific details of it, while our jobs are to pretty much just to play the game. So there's pros and cons to all of this, but I think bringing everyone in and letting us actually have a good discussion about what is the best answer to these problems is going to be the best thing for this game. I think they should bring in people like MF Pallytime, who can look at more of the casual side and try to figure out what the casual side needs. I think they need to bring in people like Cavalier Guest and Kala to look at the strategic side, to see what this game needs on the strategic side. I think they need to bring in people like Bam Bam and Treebeard and Michael Udall to talk about the Hero League aspect, to see what's going to help and hurt the Hero League. And I think they need to have us all sign an NDA and tell us what they need. So we tell them what we need, they tell us what they need, and we all work together to find a middle ground that helps this game succeed. So, For everyone watching this, I've remade this video 100 times, and I'm trying to keep it really short because I've remade this video so many times. There was one iteration of this video that took an hour. I'm not even kidding you. I went through all the changes, all the experience changes. I went through everything. The whole reason why I bring this whole thing up is because in Dungeon Defenders, they listened to too many people, and it failed. They lost all their 99% of their popularity within a week just because they just couldn't do it. I'm worried that they are already backpedaling on the one thing they think the game needed. They're already backpedaling because the mass majority of people are complaining. Now, don't get me wrong. People like Rich are complaining. I'm complaining. There's a lot of big name people that are also complaining. So, Zalia complaining. So it's not just the random people out there. However, we're complaining because we don't know exactly what Blizzard needs. I believe the problem is that they're looking to find an answer to the snowballing of the game. And they like maps like Towers of Doom, where you can make a choice at saying, no, we don't want to get this objective right now because we're likely going to lose it. Let's regroup, let's soak a little bit, let's hit a different power spike, and let's go later. I like to use the example of Magic the Gathering because you can choose whether you want to block or just take the hit. And in the early game, you take a lot of free hits to save your creatures to build up momentum, so if you get something out bigger, you can use your creatures to block while you have that bigger thing out. You get to make these decisions and risks. We need that same thing where you don't automatically lose the majority of the games if they win the first objective. You can choose if you want to give up an objective, but you're going to lose something important. I've seen other great ideas that I've talked about before. The experience, like you don't need to have the forts tied to experience, but you could have them tied to other things, and like the death timers, or make the catapult stronger. There's so many things you can do, and I have a ton of ideas. The community has a ton of ideas, and so do all these other people. Let's do a summit like we did with Warcraft 3. Let's pull in all these people. Let's have some meetings. And let's push this game in the direction that we think that the community needs and that the game also feels it needs at the same time. Sign an NDA if you have to. If literally Blizzard comes to us and they say, hey, we need more money, and the way we get more money is faster queue times. And the way we get faster queue times is shoving Hero League and Team League together. And all the people that are going, oh, well, I don't like Hero League and Team League can actually go, okay, I understand this now. And that makes sense that you need it this way. But maybe let's talk about this. Let's do a 1-hour brainstorm, and let's see if anyone can come up with a better idea. And if anyone can come up with a better idea, and if no one does, then let's merge Hero League and Team League, and let's get these queue times down. That's what we need. We need some more minds on this. I'm not saying this game's dying. I am saying that there's not as many people that are joining the game as there are people leaving the game from what I can find. And it seems like they're doing major changes to try to refresh the game. I'm cool with this. I love these changes. It adds different strategies to the game. But the backpedal is what scares me a little bit, and the other thing that scares me is just generally that I feel like they're not asking us for any of our opinions. The only time they listen to us is when they do something and the entire community kind of just spams Reddit and the forums and my videos and everything about these changes until they get changed back. While I thank you guys for being as passionate about this game as I am, it was kind of annoying to see that Reddit was all negative for 2 or 3 days, but it did get this one problem at least being looked at by them. So thank you for your toxicity. I don't know. But what I do want to say is that I think that we need to all come together, and it's up to Blizzard to do this. So Blizzard, I know a couple of you guys are watching my videos. If you can pass this along, I would really, really appreciate that. Thank you all for watching, and sorry it feels like the majority of my videos lately have been kind of ranty. I will be still bringing out Sylvanas and Stitch's videos as soon as I can, as well as I plan on bringing out the top lane tips, which I've been promising on stream for a little while now, probably after those videos. Thank you again for watching, and feel free to check out any of my other videos.